for joining. So today we will be speaking about crafting your career story with Maryann Lombardi. And I'm very excited to have her here. She's a career coach for helping find your fit and your next best role in your career. And I'd love to hand it over to her to hear more about her background and the kind of work that she does.
Hey, Anna, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I've spent about 20 plus years working with governments and institutions and brands, bringing together these billion-dollar partners and leveraging their resources in order to support thousands of people to either get jobs, to access free therapy, to grow their businesses. And I had always enjoyed that work, but I had discovered that my satisfaction with work rarely aligned with promotions or status or any of those positions that I held, and it depended on whether the work was challenging, whether I could grow, whether I felt valued and had an impact, right? And it depended on the fit, right? And we spend a lot of time trying to change ourselves to fit into the things that just aren't right? We assume that we're the problem, whether it's fashion, whether it's relationships, whether it's jobs. We squeeze ourselves and starve ourselves and contort ourselves to try to fit and to make it work instead of acknowledging that sometimes things just aren't the right fit. And so I have moved into really helping women find that fit, right? Get unstuck in their career and find that next career move that aligns with their career and aligns with their life, so they can really go after that position with the confidence that they want and really serve and have the impact that they need.
It's creating an impact, finding alignment, and finding the right role and company that really resonates with your value and the kind of impact that you truly want to create. So I'd love to dive right in. It would be amazing if you could talk about maybe one or two case studies from working with women find their fit, so that we could frame kind of what are we talking about today and what does that really look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So often what happens is that individuals come in and they feel stuck, right? But they can't quite identify what it is that is making them stuck. Often they're trying to work harder, they're trying to do more, they're trying to do all of this stuff to make it work, and it's not quite working. And so often when they come in, the first thing that we do is we do a career audit to help them understand what has been happening not only in the career that they have currently, but also leading up to that career that is feeling off, right? What are the things that light them up? What are the things that really drag them down? Where do they excel? Where are they challenged, right? And so we have our individuals come in and have a better understanding of what it is that is getting them out of alignment. And once we can figure out what is out of alignment, by contrast, we can understand what it takes to get into alignment, right? And from that point, we figure out what their vision is, what gets them into alignment. We develop the strategy with them to help them discover the next steps for how do they actionalize what they want. And then we help them really build out the business relationships that are going to help them secure whatever that position is. And so we've worked this process with many people, not only myself, I've gone through this process myself, that's how we created this, but also we've had clients come in from multiple industries. We've had folks from nursing, from banking, from more generalized corporate environments come through this process. And what we find is that some of them are usually challenged in one way or another. They're either really struggling with what fit means and they don't have a strategy, or they're really struggling in the business relationship space and they understand what they really want and fit, but they have really no understanding or experience with building the networks or tapping into the networks that they already have in order to help them secure that next position. Because as we all know, without those business relationships, it's very hard to get beyond finding that job into securing that job.
That you think would be a great case study to summarize what making an impact and using business relationships to find opportunities? looks like?
Yeah, I think I always think of Sammy. Sammy is a client of ours who came in who is a general corporate individual, right? Middle management, manages a team, but hasn't quite been able to make it past that point. She always thought that she wanted or that she needed to be kind of C-suite, sort of like on that path to C-suite, but she kept finding that she'd watch other people in those environments and they looked miserable, right? And so one of the things that we discovered when she came in was that just because she felt like she should be driving up to the C-suite doesn't necessarily mean she had to, right? Sometimes we get caught in the shouldings of what we're doing, but she felt kind of it was her responsibility as a woman leader to like drive her way to C-suite. But she's a really interesting example because what happened was instead of kind of driving up with her career, she really took a lateral move into a position that really felt much more robust, that had more challenge to it, that had more innovation to it, that had her managing about the same amount of people, but the company was just a better culture fit for her. And it had a lot more autonomy in that work. And so that's how we discovered through doing that career audit and to really working on her visioning, the kind of career that she wanted. And this was really it. And after being in this career, she has found that there is upward mobility, but it isn't in that sort of traditional, I need to go up the C-suite route. So, and she's a good example of somebody who had a network. She had a pretty decent network that was unengaged, but she really was struggling with strategy. And then I have another client who had pretty much the opposite situation where she had a really good strategy driving to the C-suite, wanted to do that, but she just had no activated network. She knew a lot of people, but she'd never really nurtured those relationships or built those relationships or actually was vulnerable enough to tell them what she was looking for and really created deeper connection with those people in her community.
A lot of times I talk about networking, building relationships, and there's so many layers of this, right? Networking is a whole process. It's not like send a DM, now you're networking. Yeah. It's a process. And there are things like activating and asking, what does that look like for the clients that you work with?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the two things that get lost often in networking is the value of listening and the value of asking, right? Because people think that they have to go in and they have to pitch themselves and talk about themselves and all of this kind of stuff, and it makes them very, very uncomfortable. And yes, there's some of that's going on, but really the first step is listening, right? It's asking somebody to connect, it's to listen to them and find out, ask good questions, right? When you're on a call with them and really listen and learn about who they are and thinking more about how you can serve them before you think about how they can serve you. Because we're developing relationships here. We're not developing transactions. And often people are uncomfortable because they think networking is about transactions. They think it's about how can this person help me? And then they feel uncomfortable because they go, okay, well, that kind of feels rude, right? And they go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to just jump in and ask somebody to help me. But really, it's this reciprocal process where we want to see how we can serve the other person. So the first part of that is asking questions and listening. And then the second part of it is before you ask about something for yourself, you always want to ask how you can serve somebody else. The most underestimated question and ask in networking is, hey, how can I serve you? How can I help you reach your goals? So that's always the first question that you should ask somebody. And that helps you start to develop that relationship quicker.
I help you, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that removes the boundaries that a lot of people put up for themselves when they believe that asking for help for themselves is wrong. So if you start with, I can help you, is there something that I can do for you today? You immediately feel like you're creating value because you know what you just did. And that enables you to break through some beliefs and boundaries around asking for help for yourself, because now you have experienced, being someone who is available for someone else. And now you can think, oh, maybe they can do the same for me because like you've experienced this yourself by doing it, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right, and I think that asking for help is hard. There's no doubt about that. But what is not hard is developing relationships. Women have been developing relationships and informal networks in their entire life from the moment we were here and starting, right? Women are incredibly adept at at helping each other, about serving each other, about finding ways to be innovative and creative in the way that they support each other. And building your network is not that dissimilar to it, right? We have to sort of get out of the mindset of networking as this kind of salesy thing and think about networking as just a process of building the same kind of relationships that we build in our personal lives. And that caring is a big piece of that, and to lean into that is to lean into that strength that you have to care about other people and want to help them and want to be of value to other people. And then the other step of that is that we have to step over our discomfort in asking for help, because like if we just accept the fact that it's hard and we don't do anything about it, we don't grow, we don't move, we don't change. Because the behaviors that are necessary to get us from where we are to where we want to be require us to do new things. And so we have to step over that line where we go, oh God, that's discomfort, right? That's uncomfortable. I don't like that feeling. And just say, you know what, today I'm going to do it even if I feel uncomfortable. I'm going to do it even if I am self-conscious. I'm going to do it even if it's just feeling a little wonky, right? Because all of that growth is on the other side of that discomfort.
And to reflect back, so when there is discomfort, that is literally the signal that you're learning to some degree, you know? So maybe we can dig into that for a little bit. How do you bridge that gap when you're just feeling terrified of asking for help? How do you create a bridge
Yeah.
for yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a couple of things that you can do. One of them is that you can stop and breathe, right? I mean, I think sometimes just the simple act of recalibrating your nervous system and stopping the anxiety for a minute and just stop for a second and breathe and say, it's going to be okay. The second step often is to think about, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that could happen is they don't respond, or somebody says, no, I can't help you, or it just feels weird and you feel uncomfortable. Can you handle that? And the likelihood is, of course you can handle that, because you're a rock star. You can do 800 things at once, so can you handle somebody saying no to you? Absolutely. So sometimes it's just to take the pressure off of this and just remind yourself the worst thing that can happen is somebody says, no, I can't help you. And you go, all right, right? Like, it's okay. It's okay for somebody to say no. So I think the first step really is to take a step back and to breathe. The second step is to understand that no is all right. It's okay. The worst thing that can happen is them saying no. You're going to be able to survive that. And then the third thing is to make sure that you really understand why this matters. Because if you are trying to get a new job, if you are trying to change your life, if you are trying to get from where you are to where you want to go, why? To what end? Like, what is the purpose of that? And sometimes by just reminding yourself, right, I am doing that because I am tired of not being able to pick my kid up from school and being like distracted on Sunday nights with the Sunday scaries. I am tired of inappropriate boss who says things that's just really ridiculous. I'm tired of the workload, right? I'm tired of not being challenged, right? Like, what is the thing? What's the why behind what you're doing? And sometimes that why will let you go, yeah, that why is more important than my discomfort right now.
Saying your immediate actions, like sending a direct message to someone or commenting or sending an email, to your bigger why. So that acts as the bridge, essentially. And another element in addition to that is that every time you do something today, that pays dividends in years to come, weeks, months, years, right? So this conversation, we're having right now, in a couple of days, other people will see that. In a couple of weeks, more people will see that. A year down the line, this conversation will have effects on both our lives in different ways. and we can never know what that is, and that's fine. But it's important to zoom out and connect your immediate actions to your greater purpose, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely right. Yeah, and to understand that this work of networking, this work of building relationships is a long game, right? Like it isn't about the immediate reward or the immediate impact. It's about how do you set yourself up to have a deeper relationship with the people that are in your community, that are in your network. How do you put yourself in a position to be of service and of help, and for other people to be able to support you in that journey? How do you build that bigger that better platform for yourself and for others, right? It's a long game process. And to your point, like every little piece matters, right? How you show up in the DMs matter, how you show up in the comments matter, how you show up in your content matters, how you invite somebody to a call matters. And so finding a way to be your authentic self and taking the pressure off, like just be you and like be warm and be kind and just jump in the water.
I remember though, I don't jump into cold water very easily. And I scram around a lot. But
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be that cold, right? Like it can be warm.
if I keep doing it, I'll be like, what was that? That wasn't cold. I don't know what I was thinking, you know? So
Yeah.
over time, things get much, much easier. And let me tell you, when I started my business, and I don't know like if this has happened to you, but I know other people also experience this. I got taught to send DMs and I was on Instagram. So I had a business coach that I found and it was really helpful. And she was like, okay, she was coaching all like very, very new people. So I was like a few months into the business. I was like, I'm going to start something. And she said, okay, we're going to send direct messages to people that are engaging with your content. And I was just terrified. And there's like moments when I was crying and I had like no clue like why this was happening. Why do I have to do this? Over time, it's like that moment never happened because the inexperience that I started with is now the kernel of exactly what's helping people learn and thrive and kind of continue their career journey, which is part of our businesses. Actually, we are both in the space.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a great example of what other people can experience too, because all of that fear, all of that discomfort only goes away through the practice and the action, right? The action actually leads you to become more confident, to be more comfortable, to be able to excel and move beyond that. And so in your own example, you just have to do it, right? We just have to do it. And we do it and we do it again and then we do it again. And it's all that imperfect action that we take is going to lead us to the point where we go, wow, we were uncomfortable about that. Huh, look at me.
Yeah.
I'm a rock star at it now.
Yeah, leveling up, so they say. Um,
Yeah.
the next thing I'd love to cover, which is part of the conversations of relationship building, is talking about yourself and what that looks like when you're creating a career story, when you're looking for a fit. How do you like talk about yourself and your experiences? What does career story mean when you're
Yeah.
networking?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And just for everybody, there in the comments, I have a worksheet for you, a resource. This is going to have a lot more information about how you can create your own career story. And so anybody who's watching this can have free access to that. So, but to answer your question, your career story is, in essence, who you are, the impact that you deliver, why it matters to you, and what your hope is for the future of that. So it's the story of your professional life. And that sounds daunting, but it doesn't actually have to be daunting because it is about you, but it is more about your impact, right? We have to think about it from the perspective of who the audience is, not just who the author is. And often when people write their career story, they focus too much on the author and they don't focus nearly enough on the audience. And so when we help people craft that story, we really want them to zero in on what that impact is, so that they know like what it is do they deliver, right? When they're in a job, when they're seeking a job, what is the thing that they do better than anybody else? What is the impact that they have delivered over time? And then to understand what is the problem that they're usually solving when they're delivering that impact. And you shape that story around impact, problem, why it matters to you, because people want to know who you are, right? They hire people. They don't hire just robots that are going to like just deliver that impact, right? Like they're hiring a human. They want to know who you are, and who you are is what makes you memorable. And I think people sometimes think that they just need to deliver keywords and all of this kind of stuff, and somehow like that'll get them where they need to go. But the reality, what gets you there is who you are and the impact you deliver. Those are the two most important things. So make sure you find a way to tell the story about why it matters to you. And then the last piece of that career story is really about like, what does the future hold, right? Like, where do you see the next step of this impact that you deliver, this story that you're telling? Where does that lead? And so when you're crafting it, you really put it together, starting with what I call a power statement, which is, I deliver this result for the benefit of this company, this people, right? You start with a power statement. I think that's one of the best things that you can do with your career story is you want to start strong. And a lot of times people start at the beginning, but we want to start at the end. We want to start with, this is who I am, this is what I deliver, and this is whom I deliver it for. Then you roll back and you start to tell them why that impact matters, how you started to get interested in that impact, and what problem you solve while you're doing that impact, how you've done that, right? And then where you see yourself in the future. So this career story is a super important thing to write, because from it, you can use it in a variety of ways, right? You use it in your writing, you use it in your speaking, you can use it in your content, you can use it to help you understand how to craft cover letters, how to ask good questions and answer good questions in interviews, right? It's a wonderful way of you understanding who you are and how to present yourself to colleagues, to collaborators, to team leaders, to your hiring managers and the people that you're talking to as you're networking and as you're looking for that new career opportunity.
That's an excellent point, to really start with the I am statement and use that as a driver of literally identifying with your impacts. First of all, I find a lot of people, especially with multiple years of experience and amazing things that they accomplished, right? Like you took a company from 0 to 1, or you created a system to have company make 100 million revenue consistently. Like those are amazing things. Like they just don't happen overnight. So owning what you created is a huge part of it, and that starting with I am is amazing. Can you speak a little more about the ownership of it? I feel like that's the first step.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an important thing to bring up, because sometimes people think that if they haven't earned the company like $100 million, somehow they haven't had an impact, right? But the reality is everybody who is in a job has some kind of impact. You could be the office manager working through efficiencies, and just because you have been doing what you're doing, you have made the company more efficient, you have had the person that you work for potentially gain certain amount of time, you have been able to make their life easier, you have been able, maybe you're creating a kind of work culture that where people feel seen and they heard and feel safe, right? Like all of these things, whether they're hard skills and hard data numbers, or whether they're more in the soft like data numbers kind of things, your impact is something that you absolutely should feel proud of and own, because without you, they would be not as better off, that company or that team or whomever you're working for. So part of it is to learn to think in impact terms. And often people are thinking in title terms and not impact terms. They're thinking about, well, I was the office manager, and so I office managed for these companies. Well, okay, what was the impact? Like, how were they better off because of your ability to do that well? You know, when you came in, did their filing system like crash and burn, and you came in and you reorganized their entire filing system and cut down on the cost of supplies? And like, what is it that you do when you come in? What problem did you solve when you get there? And like, own that and be like, damn it, I did that, right? Like, I'm a rock star, because we all are rock stars in our own little way. And I think we talk a lot about the $100 million mark. We talk a lot about like big numbers, but the reality, those big numbers don't happen when somebody else isn't in there making your life more efficient so you can actually get there, right? So
Yeah.
owning your piece of this journey is a really important part of it.
So whether you're a VP or an office manager, like we all have impact. Like there's a reason the job exists, essentially. Talk about,
Absolutely.
right, the impact and reason. Would you speak about this in the example that you brought up from the two clients that you mentioned earlier? What did, having an impact look like for them, and how did they kind of gain ownership of that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that the impact was different because one of them was Sammy was a little bit more focused on data because her job was really about data-driven metrics, and so she had a lot of data to work on. But our challenge in writing her career story was more about how to put her humanity into it, because that was not something that she was as comfortable in doing. And so we spent a lot of time really crafting a story that felt authentic to her, that allowed her to feel a little bit more, take a personal approach to. And we had the opposite problem with my other client, where that she had a lot of more human resources oriented stuff, and so yes, she hired and there was retention numbers and stuff like that, but really a lot of her work was around making people feel safe and comfortable and happy and do their best work, and the value of that. And so her story was one, we had to think about what are the metrics for that story, like how do we tell the story in numbers, but also really like lean into that feeling about what like company culture. What does it feel like to be in a company that she owns part of that human resource environment, right? So I think both of those stories were different. The other piece of this is that crafting the story is one thing. The other part of it is delivering it, right? Because there's a whole other layer to this process of how that's delivered, because some of it is delivered through writing, but a lot of that then is delivered in how you speak about it, which has its own challenges attached to it for people around confidence, especially for women, around confidence and self-promotion and all of that kind of stuff. So, but that story is so powerful to be able to get you in the door and get you in front of the right people that are going to lead you to the opportunity that's next.
At the stage, so you have crafted your story, right? You identify the impact, you identify the audiences, you talk about what you owned and how that brought value. And now you put it on your resume, on your LinkedIn, you use that in conversations. Could you tell me what are the slight differences in delivery that happen? Because that could be an interesting thing to dive into.
Yeah, so, well, it depends on what the audience is. If we're talking about speaking delivery, I think one of the first pieces is the answer to certain questions that you're always going to get, like, hey, what do you do, right? The first element of this delivery is in those networking opportunities, right? When you're speaking to people, when you're engaging, and when people are asking you those like awful repetitive questions about, hey, what do you do, right? That's where your power statement comes in. And that's why we have people write a power statement first, because we want them to feel confident. We want them to be able to answer that question. The most common question that anybody ever asks you is, hey, what do you do? So being able to answer that question confidently is a huge piece of this journey in getting confident about delivering parts of your career story. So the great thing also about knowing your career story is that a lot of the answers, a lot of the things that you will talk about when you're networking with people will probably be drawn from that story that you have already written. So a lot of the scenarios, our networking is a huge scenario of it. Formal or informal interviews is another big scenario of it, which quite honestly is not that different from networking. I think the formality makes people think that it's a whole different world, but talking about yourself is talking about yourself. Listening to people and answering questions is the same thing whether you're doing it casually or whether or not you're doing it within a more formal setting. So that comfort level with being able to answer questions is a big piece of why we want to practice through this career story. Another thing to keep in mind is that public speaking is a wonderful way of leading yourself into career development, finding opportunities to tell a story about what you do, to give presentations about what you do, to help people understand topics of your expertise. That public speaking opportunities are really wonderful for your career growth. And a lot of that stuff can come out of developing that career story, because if you're writing out your impact and you understand how you have made this company better through its culture, right? Like how you've developed a work culture that thrives, right? Being able to teach somebody that through a workshop is really powerful and it's really important. And that's another way of taking that career story and turning it into an opportunity to deliver it to either internally or externally to other companies or other teams.
Opportunities for communities that need speaking. You can give talks there. You could record yourself and just share your perspective based on the impact that you made, the outcomes, the experiences that you have. And this could be a good transition into kind of showcasing who you are while looking for the right fit. What are some of the things people look for when they're looking for their next move that is an actual fit?
Well, it depends what they want. I mean, like some people, and are you talking about sort of like different qualities of a job that they're looking for? Is that what you're?
Yeah, mix. Often it's lifestyle based plus company role related, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're burnt out managing a team of 10 and you just want, a different experience. Or you have, I don't know, a couple of years left in your career and you want to make like a greater impact, so you want to move like into a more decision making position. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So I understand what you're asking now. I think you're right. Like some of it is lifestyle related. Some of it is around wanting more time, wanting more control over time and attention, right? Which would allow people to have a better balance or a better alignment. I'm not a huge fan of the balance metaphor, but a better alignment between their work and their life and that kind of thing. So that lifestyle side of it is one side, and that lifestyle also can include making more money, right? It can be I need to make more money because my kids are going to go to college, or I want to travel, I want to live a different kind of lifestyle. I had a client who was interested in having a bi-coastal lifestyle. And so she was looking for the kind of work environment that would allow her that kind of flexibility to balance between this lifestyle, right? So lifestyle is a piece of it. Another piece of it really is boredom, right? We have a lot of people who come in and who just aren't challenged. And because they're not challenged, they're just frustrated, right? Mm-hmm. They get locked into an environment where they just feel incredibly frustrated and burnt out because they're trying to find ways of making it interesting by doing more and more and more and more, but you're just bored, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
And so a piece of it is really that challenge, right? Like how do I do something that is challenging or has more impact attached to it, or allows me to have to work in a way that's new and interesting. So that's another big piece that comes up a lot for us with people, is that challenge around it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's about shifting folks, and you could put this under the lifestyle category, but not unlike what you said, meaning that they're maybe closing in on some kind of retirement and they're trying to figure out is like, what's the transition? Right? So we have a lot of people who are working on transitions, whether it's empty nesting, whether it's transitioning out of one industry to another industry. So how do they shape their experiences or in that past industry or that past moment into a new moment? What kind of gig really is going to suit them for this next stage of life that they are in? Mm-hmm. That comes up a lot too. Management comes up too. I have a lot of people who have been in management, have managed large teams, who just want to stop, right? They don't want to manage so many people. They still want to do meaningful work. They still want to be employed well. They still want to have the flexibility and the benefits, but they just don't want to be in charge of so many people.
Yeah.
So, figuring out the nuance of downsizing in management without downsizing your role and responsibility, that's another thing that's come up more and more
Mhm.
recently.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, the whole range there. So I'm just going to follow up on one of them, which is boredom, which I feel a lot of people directly mid-career experience, especially if you don't switch roles often, either within a company or outside. And I feel like there's no like clear direction from anyone in society around how do you, you know, actually make work impactful for you? Like, how do you make it make sense for you, right? Especially if you're in an industry like tech, where there is so many opportunities to truly make impact because there's so much innovation. Um, it's like, how do you navigate that? And what I found in my own experience working different kind of roles and jobs is that 6 to 8 months in, you pretty much know what that job is. So unless it's a fast moving startup or some other experience where you change a role every year, you're gonna pretty much hit your cap like you 8 months tops every year. And then great, you can keep collecting that paycheck, but the people that truly want to make an impact, that creates boredom, frustration, and it's like they're checked out because there's nothing to check into, essentially. Um,
Yeah.
and if you work at a really large company, it may be hard to navigate that. There's not always like support there. You have to figure out what is around me, you know? So that's an interesting one to discuss. So the
Yeah,
last,
absolutely.
mhm.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I think that often people think that their job has to be everything, right? They think that they have to find all that fulfillment and all that impact from their job. And the reality is sometimes you can find that impact outside, right? You don't always have to expect that job to provide all of it. So one of the things that we also look at is is there something that you could be doing outside, which is either volunteering or hobbying or other things that bring a certain kind of impact and vitality to you, as opposed to asking your job to do all of that for you, which I think is something that's important to learn. And also to understand how do you find impact? Because what everybody else says is impact might not be how you find impact. Like, what is impactful to you? So I think really
Yeah.
understanding that self-understanding around what is meaningful to you, as opposed to measuring your meaning based on what everybody else says should be meaningful to you, I think is a nuance that's really important, because sometimes you'll
Mhm.
find the reason you're upset is because you're not delivering what everybody else thinks is
Mhm.
meaningful. But you actually are okay, right? So those kind of things are other layers to tap into in the conversation.
Let's kind of shift into kind of the last portion. Okay, so let's say you have your career story, your I am statement. Let's say you define some of the impact that you've made and want to continue making. You've defined some of the lifestyle and career choices that you want to be shifting into. How do you show up online as that person? 'Cause-
I think one thing is understanding who you are, right? I think that authenticity is a piece of that, and I don't mean authenticity in kind of like the old school, I'm going to show you what I'm eating for breakfast while I'm on a video call with you authenticity. I just mean that understanding who you are, your energy, being authentic about that, and those kind of things. So I think that authenticity is a piece of it, because our digital lives are so intertwined with our everyday lives that it's very hard for us to try too much to have a complete separation between those two things. And I think sometimes when we try to do that, we make it harder on ourselves, right? So one thing is understanding, like, just to be yourself. That's a big piece of it. The other thing is to figure out what you're comfortable with, especially when it comes to social media, when it comes to how you're showing up online, is to create some boundaries for yourself, as opposed to boundaries based on what you see other people doing. This goes back to that self understanding. Is like, you don't have to do what everybody else is doing on social media when you're on LinkedIn and what you're posting about and how you're engaging. You need to figure out what your boundaries and comfort level is, and then make decisions based on that comfort level. So that boundary setting piece of it is really important for you, just so you don't burn yourself out, and so you also don't find yourself showing up unauthentically, right? So those two things are inextricably linked. And then there's also some just best practices about making sure that that you look good, that the lighting is good, that you are speaking in a way that is confident and approachable for most people that you are engaging with online, right? And that you're a good listener. I think being a good listener online is a really important thing, and it's actually harder sometimes to do online. But being a good listener is an essential best practice when we're showing up online.
And tool or practice that's helped you become a good listener in all the different things that you do, online or not?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I do when I'm reading before I respond to things is that I read twice, mainly because I'm a fast reader, and my brain moves really fast. And so I find that if I don't read twice, I will like answer too quickly and miss things that are in what I'm reading and commenting on and stuff like that. So for me, I have a lot of tricks that slow me down, because I know that when I'm moving too fast, I'm not paying enough attention to what I'm doing, especially when I'm writing and responding and stuff like that. So that's one thing I do, is I read twice. And then the other thing that I do when I am in video conversations or that kind of thing, slowing down is another piece of it, but also is to make sure I breathe once before I respond. Because often what happens is that we're thinking too much about what we're going to say, and we're not listening enough to what the other person is saying. And so we get ahead of the game. So I always try to make sure that if a thought comes in my head that I'm like, oh, I need to respond to that one, is I take a breath and then I keep listening. So it sort of stops my brain from thinking about what I'm going to say, and goes, it's like just breathe, and then it just recenters me into listening. Those are two things I do personally just to help myself, mainly because I just move too fast, right? Everything moves too fast.
To reflect back, breathing seems to be very helpful. If you notice you're stepping away from the conversation mentally, even if your face is there, take a breath. Something on that topic to remind everyone is it's not your job to respond to every single comment and every word that you hear. It's about building a connection through reflection and continuing the, I guess, reflection, right? The continuing the conversation based on the general themes you're talking about. It doesn't have to be like just this one comment or this one thing. And the second thing that I think is very helpful for everyone is to read twice. So if you're reading a post that you want to comment on, or you get an email that you're really excited to receive, read it multiple times to really see, okay, what are they saying? What's the information really about? What are they trying to tell me? Like, what's the information behind the words that's happening? So that's really helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know you must have done this. I've done this 800 times, where somebody sends you an email and then you respond, and then you realize when you look back later that you didn't actually answer the question they asked, because you didn't read, you just read the beginning and then you skimmed the rest of it, right? But there was a question later on that you just didn't answer because you didn't, and that's got to be frustrating when because that's happened to me too, where I send something to somebody and they clearly didn't read the entire thing. So it's just slowing yourself down and actually reading the whole thing helps a lot.
You want to end with like one main takeaway of like why, maybe we say, why is finding a career fit so important?
Oh my God, because it's exhausting when you don't have it, right? I think it is way too easy for us to stay stuck when we don't exactly know what next is, right? It's easier to stay where you are because you're used to the misery or whatever it is than it is to actually make the choice to change. But man, the other side of that misery is so much better. So I think it's really important for us to figure out how to embrace change, to figure out how to embrace that discomfort, and really figure out what that dream is that we want, because you absolutely can find a way to get there. All you need is strategy and relationships and support, right? That's really what you need to get you where you're going. So
Yeah.
my takeaway would be just like just I'm going to say breathe again just because I think breathing is important. But I'll just say
It
breathe
is.
and just take that step. Take that step forward, right?
Anything else you want to add before we close?
Just thank you so much, Anna, for taking the time to have this conversation. And if there's anything that I can do to be more supportive for you and the work that you're doing in your community, please let me know.
For joining us today. And Maryann, it was such a pleasure to learn from you and discuss this really valuable topic. So please, take what you can from this and put that into action for yourself. Bye, everyone.
Bye.